RIVERKEEPER at the James River Association, and I'm also the Senior Advocacy Manager helping to oversee all of our advocacy programs. That's water quality monitoring, that's following up on pollution issues, that's work at the policy level and General Assembly. Our advocacy team, which includes Erin Reilly, our staff scientist, works on a lot of different kinds of things to act as a voice for the river and to make sure we're keeping our eyes and ears open for new and emerging issues on the river. Today, we're gonna enjoy some cheersing with you, enjoying some beverages, and talk to you a little bit about water quality testing. Water quality testing, that's a really general way to frame it. And there's all kinds of monitoring out there. You've got, just in Virginia alone, you've got state agencies, federal agencies that are out there doing long-term monitoring projects. You've got universities that are doing water quality testing. And you've got nonprofit groups like us and even volunteer organizations that are looking at water quality data. But they're using this data for lots of different purposes. We could spend, easily spend an hour talking about climate change, talking about long-term data assessments, habitat. Today, we're really going to focus on a program that James River Association has run for about 9 years called the James River Watch, which has a bit of a different focus. We launched this program in 2011 to really help answer one common question that we get from the public, which is it safe to go swimming or boating sometimes in the James River? It's hard to answer that question, but we know through data and through the project that we lead focused on this question, that most of the time the answer is yes, it is safe to go swimming, but it can depend on a few key things. And we know that it can be difficult for folks who are trying to plan a trip to the river to really wrap your arms around all of this information and truly understand, is it safe based on whether it's rained recently, whether the river is high due to flooding and lots of rain, or maybe the river's too cold. Hypothermia can be a risk as well. We wanted to work on a project and to develop a tool that would easily allow the public to get information to help answer this question of whether it's safe to swim. To do that, we had to develop a brand new program though that focused on getting data that was essentially a gap back in 2011. If you go down to places in Hampton Roads or Virginia Beach, there's weekly testing that's done by the Virginia Department of Health that is totally focused on this recreational question. So the Department of Health will go and test at some of the common swimming beaches, and they'll actually post a beach if bacteria levels in particular are too high for safe recreation. That picture you see on the screen of that yellow sign, that is actually an example of a placard that the Virginia Department of Health might put out if bacteria levels are too high any given week. I'll tell you more about what that bacteria level really means in just a few minutes. But we noticed that if you look across the James River watershed and certainly across Virginia too, there's a bit of a gap in that level of bacteria data. And so we wanted to kind of take a step back and really think about how we could help accommodate that need and to make that publicly available going forward. We could go ahead and go to the next slide. So why do we test the water? There's a lot of things we could test for, as I noted already. There's all sorts of programs that are really focused on different questions. For the James River Association and for the James River Watch Project, again, we are focused on recreation. We're focused on answering that question of whether it is safe to swim or boat. And one of the best measures of that, again, is bacteria. If we measure the level of fecal bacteria in the river, that can indicate the presence of other pathogens. And a pathogen is essentially something that can make you sick. If there are pathogens in the water, that means there's an increased risk of waterborne illness. Stomach illnesses, other kinds of things that are generally associated with, let's just get it out there. It's all associated with fecal waste, poop in the river. That's really what we are measuring in a lot of ways when we go out and collect a water sample and then measure it for fecal bacteria. So what we're actually measuring in these water samples is either enterococci bacteria, and that's a type of bacteria that you find in fecal waste, and we tend to look for that in salt waters. It's a good indication of pathogens in salt waters. In fresh waters, places like Williamsburg, upstream to the headwaters of the James, we test for E. coli bacteria, and that's also a good indication of whether there are pathogens in the water. We do that in freshwater environments. If you look across the whole state of Virginia, E. coli or fecal bacteria, that is the most common reason that a water body is considered impaired. When we say impaired, we mean it's too polluted to be used for its intended use. Swimming, fishing, boating. The Virginia Department of Environmental Quality goes out and measures water quality, and they assess whether a water body is meeting or not meeting that intended use. And unfortunately, bacteria is that indicator that we have a long ways to go on. Over 11,000 miles of streams and rivers in Virginia today are still impaired for bacteria. That's not to say that it's not perfectly safe to go swimming or boating many times, but there's a few rules that we have to keep in mind when we do plan trips down to the river. So some of you are probably asking, where does this stuff come from? Rain is really the biggest driver. When we have a lot of rain, then we tend to have a lot of runoff washing into the river. And just like Bill said at the opener, the health of the watershed is really the biggest reflection of the health of the river. If we have pollution on the landscape that's exposed, it could be pet waste, it could be a leaky sewer pipe, it could be a number of other sources. Rain is typically the driver that's going to carry that waste from the city street or from the suburban yard into the storm drain, and then ultimately into that creek and into the river. And so that is a big enough problem that we do have to measure for those fecal bacteria levels and make sure we post those results every week so folks have an idea of what conditions look like. You can go ahead and skip to the next slide. And I'm going to hand it off now to Erin Reilly, our staff scientist, to talk a little bit more about how we measure bacteria.
So each week we have 32 sites where we have volunteers go out to visit, and I see a lot of our awesome volunteers on the call. So everybody give them a virtual round of applause as a thank you for everybody coming out. So all of our volunteers will go out to the sites and they use these pole cores, these poles that have bottles on them to collect water for us, as well as so we also have these meters that they use. They're put in the water and they measure conductivity and temperature. They take this water that they've collected back to, in some cases, their homes, and in some cases, they take them back to our partners or to our offices. So also a big shout out to all of our partners who are helping us to process the samples and to Genevieve, who is our Richmond water quality testing specialist, and Emily, who is our Williamsburg water quality testing specialist. And so each week we get 2 water samples. One we test for turbidity from each site. One we test for turbidity, and then the other one we test for bacteria. So turbidity is a measure of how clear the water is. If you've ever heard somebody talk about tannins in wine, water and streams also have tannins that can make it darker. You can also get the water's less clear after we've had big rains. So if anybody's been down to the river recently, it's a lot muddier looking. It looks brown. You can't see all the way to the bottom, and that's what turbidity is testing. So once these samples come back to the lab and we test the turbidity samples, and then what we do is we add, so in some cases we have this little packet of powder and we add it in, and if you want to go to the next slide, and in other cases we add a gel mixture. And so we have 2 different ways that we're actually testing the methods. So if we add the powder in, we get to look at the bacteria colonies under UV light, and it glows up really cool. And then if we're testing them in the gel method, we use these Petri dishes. And so some of the volunteers are actually incubating these Petri dishes in their homes. So thank you to all of our volunteers. And what we do on Fridays is we go through and we count all of the different colonies, and we come up with a level of bacteria. So the reason we do this collect on Thursdays so we can report out on Fridays is because most people are out on the river during the weekends, right? So we want people to know for their weekend trip if they can plan to be out, if maybe they should pick a different site because the site that they were going to go to might have some higher levels and that sort of thing. So everybody uploads all of their data and it's put out onto our website. So the website is essentially a way to look at all of the data. So I'm going to try to share my screen and show you all what the website looks like. So can everyone see that? Perfect. So if you go to jamesriverwatch.org, this is what's going to come up. And you can see these are all of the sites that we have our testing at. And like Jamie mentioned, our goal really is to let you know if it's safe to go out and boat or swim at common sites that people recreate at. So most of our sites that our volunteers are testing at are common boat ramps, they're public access places, places that people go fishing. There's two types of sites. So you can see we have this boating condition station, which is the squares, and the swimming condition station, which is the circles. So the squares, I'm going to click on Scottsville Station. These are stations that are operated by the U.S. Geological Service. And so our goal is to really have everything in one place for you. So right now you can see the conditions at Scottsville are fair. And you can see what the stream flow is. So this is a rate of discharge, so how fast the stream is moving. And then you can also see what the river level is. So right now it's at 5.6. But if you click on the station, you can see that we had, it'll show you the continuous data for the last 3 days. You can see that on the 24th, we had some rain that happened and the river got a little bit high. So it went into this yellow stage, which is our caution stage. So at the yellow stage, you might want to think about, well, you know, maybe if I'm an experienced paddler, then it's fine for me to go out in the yellow stage. But if I'm inexperienced or I don't really know the area, like I've never been there, I might want to think a little bit and maybe go someplace else. And so the caution stage happens for if the water levels are too low as well as if they're too high. So that's how we have our boating stations set up. And if you zoom out, you can see we have stations all the way, whew, that's too far, from, I think this is Maury Ben Salem down to Newport News. And so if you click on one of the swimming stations, for example, Reedy Creek, you can see when you're zoomed in, you can see all of the stations in the area. They pop up with this fair or caution label. So if I'm looking at Reedy Creek, it comes up with the conditions from the last time it was monitored, which was last Thursday. And it can tell you about what the air temperature is, what the bacteria level was, what the water temperature and what the water temperature is. And so if you click on the bacteria level, you might not be interested in this, but maybe you are. You can see in the last 3 years, Reedy Creek has only had 4 instances where it exceeded the threshold. So it's pretty interesting if you want to look at some of the different sites and see sort of the history, but you can also just look at the site and see a quick snapshot of if it passed or not. It also will tell you sort of right away how warm or cold it is. Another one of the cool things that we've tried to incorporate in is making it easy so you don't have to check 15 different places for all of the information. So if you pull up the legend, you have some more options of things that you actually can look at, including the National Weather Service. So if I click this on, you can see that in the northern part of our watershed right now, it looks like we have a severe thunderstorm watch. And so that's not for everywhere. And so it can help you sort of decide maybe you don't want to go out in the areas where you have a severe thunderstorm watch. So the goal really is to just help people decide where to go and help them make informed decisions. So I'm going to stop sharing and see if Sarah can pop up the slideshow again. So beyond sort of just the website and just uploading all of this data and sharing it with everybody, we also want to sort of do more with it. So it's not just that we're collecting this data and putting it out on the internet, but we're also using this data to help us make decisions and to help us form partnerships and identify other areas where we can sort of do more. So for example, at Powhatan Creek, we noticed over the last 2 years that it was failing a lot when the sites that were downstream and upstream of it were still passing. So these weren't necessarily related to huge rainstorms or things like that, that it might be an indication that something else is wrong. So right now we're in discussions with, and we're working with James City County and the Hampton Roads Sanitation District to do some source tracking to figure out if the fecal coliform that we're seeing is human fecal coliform, if it's related to sewage, if it's related to septic systems, or if it's related to animals. And so in doing this, we can actually possibly track down maybe a broken pipe or a septic system that's leaking and actually make a difference and make this site a little bit better for people to recreate at. And so with that, I just want to introduce one of our volunteers, Luis Maturana, who has actually been with JRA and been volunteering with the Riverwatch program for 3 summers. And so he's been with JRA for longer than I have, to share some of his experiences about the program.
Thank you, Erin. Well, hello, everybody. And thank you for inviting me to share my experience. I realize that a few of you are doing the same, which is great. So sharing my experience, my family and I moved to Richmond in 2015. We have been a pretty outdoorsy family forever, I guess. We enjoy the outdoors. And it's difficult to enjoy the outdoors and not caring about them. And as everybody in Richmond, we fell in love with the river and enjoy the river pretty much every week. And we find ourselves either paddling or swimming or fishing or just hiking around the river all the time. So as soon as I learned about the James River Association, I got interested and attended one seminar at Triple Crossing, which created another addiction after that. But then I started volunteering, and I first worked at Hopewell, which wasn't very easy commuting there, but it was a great experience understanding the different dynamics of the river. So on the professional side, I've been in the water industry for 20 years, and that allowed me to interact with industries that use water and dispose water all the time. So my concern was twofold. One, the personal side, enjoying the outdoors and wanting to protect the environment, do my part to protect the environment. But also on the professional side is all the concern of what industries may do to the environment where I take my children to play, and I play as well. So volunteering was basically a good channel for me to work on all those areas. The testing for me is, as the saying goes, what gets measured gets done. So there are 2 things. One is what Erin was explaining, that informs all of us about if it's safety to go to a river. But on the other hand, it's also a tool to hold accountable all the users of water and to be responsible with it, which is what we see every year with the State of the James report, and see that the river is recovering and we get to enjoy it. It's closing that circle between holding those industries accountable for irresponsible use of the James as well. So as I said, 3 years helping, I found the group amazingly professional, friendly, passionate about the river. Every chance I take, I also enjoy the paddle outs and the trips. So it's basically something that is completely ingrained with our society in Richmond, and I hope to keep doing it for the years to come. I'm taking the opportunity right now to teach my children, and my wife is helping me. So it's becoming a family event that we get to enjoy very much, and it's giving me also the flexibility to work with my calendar. If I cannot do one part of the testing, then my wife will help me. My son always will enjoy to go and get water samples with my wife or myself. So that is also building a like second generation of conscious about the environment and supporting this. So as I said, very proud and happy to be a volunteer, and I hope I can keep doing it for the next few years. So that's my story.
Cheers to you, Luis.
Thank you,
Thank
Jamie.
you for all your help these years.
I wish I had one. I'm at work, so.
Something to look forward to later. So having, I feel fortunate myself to have worked on this project for so many years as well, and to see it grow. It has grown substantially. We started with just a handful of sites, and if you look at our website, I encourage you to really spend some time clicking around at the James River Watch after this webinar to get to know it. But if you click on a lot of the stations, you'll notice that there's other partners involved, that it's not just the James River Association. We've got Rivanna Conservation Alliance, the Peninsula Master Naturalists. We've had help from Virginia State University, from Twin River Outfitters, American Water. I know I'm leaving out some, but there's been so many partners that have helped us out. And that's how we've been able to add sites over the years, is by sort of capitalizing on those volunteer and community efforts that were already happening, or maybe just needed a little bit of a push to get started in different parts of the James River watershed. And so we've grown to have 27 sites this year. It will vary from year to year, depending on different changes in our plans and where there are sort of growing needs. But we have 27 sites covering the whole watershed, from really the headwaters in Buchanan, Virginia, down to Hampton Roads. And it really is quite remarkable. It's a lot of logistics to go into this. So huge hats off to Erin, to Genevieve, for all the work they do to make this happen on a week-to-week basis. We have 60 to 70 volunteers throughout this summer that are helping us with this work. And so it takes a lot of coordination to make it happen. So it really is remarkable that we've been able to pull this together, and it's all in the spirit of providing a free public service that enables folks like you to understand what's happening in the river and whether it's safe to plan your recreational trip down to the water. So the question you're all wondering, what does the data say? Well, for this year alone, we can say that we've got an 86% pass rate. That's actually slightly higher than our long-term pass-fail rate, which is at 85. And so we're doing okay. And we've actually got a handful of stations you can see there on the slide that have 100% passing rate this year. So not one single failure, and that's really amazing. And to sort of help explain that, the EPA and the Virginia Department of Health have long-term epidemiological studies that say if the fecal bacteria is at this level, then there's an increased risk of waterborne illness from recreational activity. So that's what we're really comparing this to on a week-to-week basis. So 86% of the time, our tests have shown that it is safe to swim this summer. Some of the sites where we're seeing continued problems, Powhatan Creek, that's one that Erin already spoke to a little bit. That's really more surprising because that actually was one of our cleaner sites. If we go back several years, we can see we had very few failure rates. And we also noticed, like Erin said, the stations around Powhatan Creek weren't really showing problems. At the same time, we had problems on Powhatan Creek. Additionally, we weren't really seeing the high readings on Powhatan Creek after rainstorms. And again, generally it's after rain that we tend to see high bacteria levels. So we're excited actually that we're able to do a little more digging into this question with James City County and the Hampton Roads Sanitation District. We're actually going to be doing some source tracking, which is actually a way of looking at the genetic signature of the bacteria in the water and helping to trace it back to either a human source or maybe an animal source or some other source. So that's underway, and we're excited to be able to figure that out and hopefully address that problem moving forward. Rockets Landing. So in the city of Richmond, this is actually near our office, and the biggest contributor here is that Rockets is downstream of a couple of discharge points for the city's combined sewer system. For those who are not familiar with it, the combined sewer system is not a new thing. It's been around for over a century. It's quite old. You know, you go back to the late 1800s, CSOs were all the rage. That was the best way to control runoff and sewage. But the city being such an old city with very old infrastructure, this is a challenge that they're sort of facing now to separate their sewer pipes from their stormwater pipes. And essentially, imagine if you've got one pipe that carries both sewage and rainwater, and you get a sudden surge of rainwater, you can overwhelm that system and get a mixture of stormwater runoff and sewage going into the river. That still occurs today. You can sign up for notifications from the city to get an email when it does happen. And I encourage you to do that if you are spending time recreating on the river, especially downstream of the 14th Street Bridge in the city of Richmond. The good news here is that this is something that we're well aware of at the James River Association, as is the city of Richmond. There's been a lot of investments over the years to address the problem. And as of this year, legislation was passed by the General Assembly that sets a deadline to sort of address this issue, this long-term issue of the combined sewer system of 2035 to reduce and minimize those overflows to an acceptable level. So we're excited that those efforts are underway as well. Riverview Farm Park in Charlottesville, that's another site where we've had some high levels this year. We're not actually sure what the direct cause is there, but I'll note again, it has been a heavy, a very rainy August. I think we were on track to be one of the rainiest Augusts on record a few weeks ago after all the heavy rain. And we're actually already on track to be one of the wettest years on record. So I think we're approaching 40 inches, which is very wet. Again, if rain is the major driver for pollution runoff, that is a challenge we have to think about moving forward. But we do know how to fix that. We do know how to minimize the amount of runoff, and a lot of those things are already happening today. City of Richmond, places like Williamsburg, Lynchburg are embracing plans to include more green infrastructure, basically more land that can absorb runoff, making sure that runoff isn't instead going into the sewer and carrying pollution with it, but instead is being drawn up by trees and vegetation and staying in place. There's a lot of work that's being done in some suburban neighborhoods too. We have a program called the River Hero Homes that encourages homeowners to do things on their own land that will trap that runoff, make sure it gets absorbed into the ground and doesn't end up carrying bacteria pollution and other pollution into the river. So I will say, while we have some significant challenges ahead and we still see areas where there's high levels of bacteria after rainstorms, we have come a long way, and the James is consistently ranked one of the healthiest rivers draining into the Chesapeake Bay, according to the University of Maryland's Chesapeake Bay report card. Our State of the James report, which does quite a bit of additional analysis looking at water quality indicators and pollution sources, is also showing that we've made a lot of significant progress over the years, bringing us up to a B- in overall health. And that's really as a result of a lot of investments to stop pollution in our cities, on our farms, and at our industries. So we have come a long way, and we are seeing reduced levels of pollution across the board. Go ahead and skip to the next slide if you would. So with that, I've talked enough, and I'm sure that we've generated a lot of thoughts and questions from the group. I will say that we're real excited to offer this to you. We could talk, Erin and I spent a lot of time working on water quality testing through the summer, and we can certainly talk to you all day about it, but we wanted to leave some space for conversation and of course for some cheersing as well. So I want to turn it over to Kristen again, and we can start to talk through some questions you might have.
Thanks. And thank you both for all that information. I know we did have a question about rain, and it'd be great to chat a little bit about the rain. I know you covered it a little bit, but you know, how can folks find out during a rainstorm or right after? You know, when is it safe to get into the river?
So I can answer that, and Erin might have more to add to it. So the Department of Health, which I mentioned earlier on, they also do bacteria testing, and they do also post advisories when they have high bacteria levels at some of the stations they test in Hampton Roads and along the coast of Virginia. The health department says that you should avoid swimming within a few days after heavy rainfall. So what does that mean exactly? Heavy rainfall, you know, generally you can classify light, medium, heavy rainfall into, you know, heavy being, you know, a third of an inch or more within an hour. So a heavy downpour can result in more of that pollution runoff. And I always tell people just to make other plans. Don't swim 48 to 72 hours after that heavy rainfall. You can always, you know, get on some really easy services, weather.com, Weather Underground, and look at where precipitation has fallen recently. But as Erin pointed out, we've also got that built into our website. You can look at the national weather forecast that's coming up over the next 3 days to see what rain is predicted to fall in a given area. Again, after a heavy rain, you tend to have more bacteria, more pathogens in the river, so a higher level of risk for recreational activities like swimming and boating.
Great. Catherine asked about how to receive the email updates from the city, and if you check in the chat box, there's a link you can click to sign yourself up so you can stay up to date. Bert had a question about how we test in the tributaries, such as Swift Creek and Chesterfield. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Sure. So we do not only test in the James, we test in the Appomattox and the Chickahominy and the Maury River. And so we do test on some of the tributaries. It's easier to sort of see those just by going to that map at jamesriverwatch.org. We don't test currently in Swift Creek, but I do believe that Chesterfield County does some testing in different parts of Swift Creek, and they have sort of maybe have added and dropped stations over the years. I will say that in general, we're very careful about when and where we add new sites. If we add a site, we want to make sure that it's something we will continue to test for years moving forward. And we also want to make sure that it addresses a need, meaning there's definitely recreation happening there. It's a publicly accessible place, and there's not already other testing occurring there. So I'll say if you ever have a question or suggestion about a particular place, please reach out to either Erin or I. We always are interested in talking to citizens with questions or concerns. And that's usually how we get ideas for new stations, is by talking to folks like you. On the Appomattox, just to answer the rest of your question, Bert, we test in Farmville, right at the Route 10 bridge in downtown Farmville. We've also test at a couple of places right near the mouth of the Appomattox at the American Water Intake, which is near the Hopewell City Marina, and also at City Point Park. We're not testing this year at the falls of the Appomattox in Petersburg, but that is generally a place that we test. One of the negative, I guess, consequences on our end for our testing program as a result of COVID was there were no students at Virginia State University to assist us this year. So unfortunately, our Petersburg monitoring station was one we had to drop for this year.
Thanks, Jamie. We had one more question, and I encourage everyone to keep sending questions in as they pop up. Mark had a question about the sewer system. Can you expand a little bit about the combined sewer overflow and beyond Richmond, how sewage impacts the river?
So what I described in Richmond is really unique to Richmond. There are other localities that have combined sewer systems. Lynchburg is one of them. And actually, I see that Bill in the chat box has added a link to sign up for the Lynchburg combined sewer notifications too. But you also have sewer leaks that can occur at any other place in the watershed that are not called combined sewers, but simply sanitary sewer overflows. So again, heavy rain can contribute to failures in a standard sewer system, and other maintenance issues can also cause sanitary sewer overflows sometimes. So it's not just combined sewer overflows that are a problem. You know, in the example of Powhatan Creek in James City County, you know, one of our working theories is that there's a break in a sewer main somewhere along Powhatan Creek, because the sewer main actually borders Powhatan Creek for a good portion of the water body. So those do occur in a lot of places. And that's one of the great things I think about our program, is it's not just about posting that data each week, but when we do find those consistently high levels of bacteria, it allows us to take that information to a local government or to another entity that may be able to help us address the problem. So we can follow up and do more testing. We can pass on information to the Department of Environmental Quality. And if it's a leaky sewer pipe, or if it's a leaky septic system, if we're in a more rural area, we can do additional follow-up testing to try to identify the culprit.
Thanks. And keeping up with the theme, we had a question about septic systems. I think you just touched on it. But is there anything more you wanted to expand on with septic and how that might affect water quality differently?
Yeah, Mark, I'd be interested in talking to you more offline if you have a specific instance or specific concern with the septic failure. It just requires some persistence in my experience. If there's evidence of a problem, there's got to be that follow-up with the local health district to make sure that things are enforced. Sometimes, a citizen, a homeowner might need some help if they can't afford to do a septic upgrade. And there are programs out there for low-income citizens or for rural localities to help get septics upgraded. But it starts with getting the information to the health district and being persistent to make sure they follow up on the issue.
Love seeing this. Where do we need more volunteer help? Where can we really use some people monitoring the water quality?
I can take this one, Jamie. So right now we are covered for 2020, but we are actively signing people up if they're interested in helping us with 2021. We only test during the summer when people are probably going to be recreating. So we test from Memorial Day to Labor Day. But once you sign up, we will start sending out information about trainings for next year, and we'll ask you about what sites you're interested in helping us monitor at. That's also a chance if you have a site that you're really interested in and that you think that we should add, you could throw that in there. And also we accept jokes. Several people who have signed up have sent us some really good jokes that we've been passing on and enjoying. So feel free to toss those in there as well. And I'll toss the link into the chat about where to sign up in just a second.
Thanks, Erin. We'll take a couple more questions. So if you have any burning questions, please send them in now. Ted had a question about outcomes of our efforts to mitigate livestock access to the water.
It's a great question. So if you've paddled in Richmond, maybe you haven't seen a cow walking along the, I hope not, you haven't seen a cow walking along the river. But if you go to a lot of other places in the upper parts of the watershed, including outside of James River State Park, places downstream of Scottsville, you'll see cows. It's not unusual, and it may sort of give an idyllic perspective to see the cows in the farmland, but the reality is cows poop. And just like every other animal, and when there are no efforts to keep those cows out of the river, their waste can end up in the river. And as they are going in and out of the river, they cause erosion along the bank. It's a well-documented problem. And it's a priority for the state of Virginia to put in fencing and alternative water sources to keep cows out of the river and to mitigate that pollution source. So we rely on our local water, soil and water conservation districts to do a lot of that work, to do outreach to farmers, sort of sell them on the idea of fencing cows out of the river. And so it's important that we provide adequate funding for those soil and water conservation districts, those advocates, to get those projects on the ground. And that's one of the things James River Association does, is we work at the General Assembly to educate lawmakers about the importance of programs that fund cattle exclusion fencing, as well as green infrastructure and stormwater collection programs and systems for our urban areas. We do a lot of work to try to make sure that Virginia continues to invest in those things. This past year, legislation was passed by the General Assembly that actually mandates that we have to have cows fenced out of the river by an end date, which essentially coincides with the Chesapeake Bay cleanup plan. I'm not going to get too wonky on you tonight, but Virginia has this big plan. It's called the blueprint, sometimes called the blueprint, also the Chesapeake Bay cleanup plan, that basically stipulates all the things we've got to do across all of the cities and the counties, local governments, the industries, to reduce pollution and to restore the Chesapeake Bay. And all I want to point out is that fencing cows out of the river is a really important strategy in that plan. And Virginia is prioritizing that very highly above other activities. So it's something that we're working on. We wish we could do it faster. We hope that we can reach that goal. After 2025, we want to see a cow-free James, we like to say. But it is a major challenge that we still observe when you are boating in those more rural areas upstream of Richmond.
So I'll end this with a personal question I have. Did anyone see that seal in the James, and what does that mean about water quality? Did we do a great job? Is that why he's all the way up here?
So I'm not sold that it was a seal, but if it was possibly a really large river otter, which seems more likely, yes, they are generally an indication of good water quality. So river otters are not only fun to see, they're playful critters, but generally when we see them, it's an indication that there's healthier fisheries, improving water quality. And again, we know that's the case in the James. We've seen a long-term improvement in overall water quality.
All right. Well, with that, we'll kind of bring it to a close here. We'll be following up with everyone. So if you have a question that pops into your mind, feel free to reach out to us. We love talking about this stuff, so we're here to answer questions. We'd love for all of you who joined us, if you're not already volunteering, to go to beagmchanger.org. If you're not following us on social media, that's a really easy way to keep up with what we're up to. We're offering these webinars and other ways to engage with us during this time of social distancing. You can find information about our volunteer opportunities there. You can support our work by donating or sharing with your friends. And if you're interested in equipping your home to help maintain that good water quality and making the James a cleaner place, sign up to be a River Hero home. We'll be sending that link in our chat box, so you can click on it and learn more about how to plug in with us. Thank you all for joining. We loved talking about river quality and cheersing with you all. I'll close it out with a cheers. Cheers to you, Jamie. Bill, if there's anything else you want to say to everyone.
No, I saw one last question pop up on impacts from the negotiations on the budget. And that is an active issue. And another great way to get involved is to sign up for our Action Network, and we send out updates. And someone was asking about other volunteer opportunities that don't require going out and monitoring. And helping to write your legislators is another great way to do that. So thanks for those questions. And we're hopeful that we'll be able to maintain the vast majority of the funding that was included in the budget. But it is certainly a challenging time, and we'll keep you posted. Thanks again for everyone participating and for your interest.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great evening.